I guess to give a little bit of background, also, since we're a JavaScript shop, I'm not going to talk to you about JavaScript. This is going to be about Ruby. So I ended up building a Rails app for this. But a little bit of background for anybody that might be tuning in or watching this after the fact. We send weekly emails basically to ourselves regarding what progress we have made in the past week of our open source work. Since we all get an open source work or open source day here, kind of like just to keep track of like what we're working on, progress, things that are going on. The goal kind of was for anybody in the community that might want to see what the front side is doing in open source could go to a repo and see all of our like updates and everything that we're currently working on. We kind of expanded it out to treat it like a client. So like with our clients, we send out weekly emails and updates to keep them in the loop. We kind of just do that to the same for ourselves. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to build an app. Well, all right, let's get into it. So why a weekly mailer app? And the real reasons are because the current way that we did it put a lot of pressure on the person that was writing the email. I found myself at like 10:30 at night, 9 o'clock at night, like trying to gather everyone's update and like take notes and take the proper notes on like what their update was and then kind of pull it together and then send the email. That put a lot of pressure on the person, and I didn't feel comfortable like saying, all right, Alex or Charles or Stephanie, like, here, this is, you have to write this email, you're responsible for this week, and like, here's the burden that comes with it. I wanted to make it a lot easier. And the current way that we had wasn't really collaborative. We didn't collaborate as much as we do now in the current process. And really, honestly, being a programmer, I just thought it would be really cool if I could hit the merge button and then shoot off an email. So I guess let's build that app that does that. So I guess the first thing you kind of think about is, what does this app need to do to accomplish the goal that we want to do? And it needs to listen to pull request events. I put that in quotes because, like, what do you even call that? I guess you can call it an event, but I want to use that lightly. We need to filter for only weekly email and merge events. So GitHub will send you any kind of event that you want to know about on your repo. They'll tell you anything that happens. But what we want to do is we want to filter out, since the OSS Wumbo repo serves many other purposes, it has a lot of other things in there. You could have a pull request that isn't for the weekly email, and we don't want an email to shoot off for that. So we need to filter that out and only look for things that are specifically for the weekly email. After that, we need to get the markdown from that PR that we created and parse it. And then we need to send that email from the person that merged the PR. So it looks like it came from one of us rather than just this glob email that sends everything. So PR events, we can just kind of think of them as webhooks. The webhooks are we're going to leverage for this. And webhooks are just HTTP posts to an endpoint that you control. You tell GitHub, I want you to send this post to this endpoint that I'm listening to, and I'll handle whatever I want to do with that post. So GitHub sends you JSON. And you can't see this image really well, but there's going to be a little bit of like a show and tell after this presentation. I'll show you the whole GitHub interface. But basically, this is what it looks like. This is a real webhook event that happened for one of our emails that we sent out. And it sends you this giant JSON blob of like everything that is related to this merge request that happened, any action. So you get a root level key on there called action, and then what happened to that. For us, we only want to look for things that were closed. You get all the data that's available via the API in this event. So I wanted to create a Rails app that would handle all of this trickery. So after I created the Rails app, I just created a controller that threw it into webhooks and then a repo controller. And then since it's a post request, I defined a create action inside of that controller that will then handle anything that is sent as a post request to this endpoint. So this is kind of, you having a hard time seeing, Charles?
Actually, should be looking.
So in the controller, I just do a create, and at this point, this is where we will handle what happens, like when they send us this data. This is where it's going to end up. So then the next thing we need to do is we need to filter out anything that's not a merge event. And in Rails land, params action is special. So you actually can't do params action to get that key off that hash. You have to do request params and then action, and then make sure that equals closed. So that works. That's good. Now we're only getting closed PRs, but that means now if whatever PR you close on GitHub, it'll just shoot off this mailer for us, and we don't want that. So now we need to filter out anything that's not the weekly mailer. And there is a better way to do this. I did this on a weekend. What I eventually really want to do is I want to make another GitHub API request when this happens and check the label on this PR and make sure it has the proper label. But right now, what I'm doing, I just make sure that the title includes weekly email. And this has already bitten us. This is case sensitive. And it's like you have to have the correct string in there exactly, or else it's not going to fire off the email. So now that we have those two kind of safeguards in place, so we're not just shooting off emails left and right, we have to fetch the markdown file. And in order to do that, we have to make an API request for this. So we're going to use GitHub's gem called OctoKit to work with their API. Makes it really easy. And we're just going to grab the file from the URL of the pull request. And in your giant blob of JSON that they send you in that post request from the webhook, you can grab the pull request number and then the raw URL off of that, which then you can get the files. So then we have that URL, and then we leverage HTTP party to actually go make that request, and we get the body from that. So the body is going to be just this like raw markdown that we can do whatever we want with. And then in this action, we're going to identify who actually merged the PR. And once again, I guarantee there's a better way to do this, but I do this through an environment variable that I set because I don't want to push people's emails into a public repo. And I just set these as environment variables. So then we just identify the sender by picking off their GitHub username, and their username, that's the key to the environment variable, and the value of that environment variable will be their email. So we're kind of pulling together these like 3 arguments that we're going to send off to the mailer. And we also want to send along the merge date because that's important for us to build the title of the email. So then we put the date, which is pretty easy. We just pull that off the JSON blob that we have again. And then you kind of fire off the mailer. I don't want to get too deep into like actually how to build the mailer in this talk, because I feel like that's a whole nother like lunch and learn that you could just talk about Rails mailers. So this is like the kind of the final thing. And this is not actually how I write Ruby. I did this for the presentation to make it like kind of parsable. But I set these 3 variables. The markdown body is the thing that I went and fetched the actual markdown. I wanted to identify who's actually sending this email, and then what's the date that this email should have. And then actually the OSS mailer handles parsing the markdown and formatting it and stuff for us, and then building the title for us too. So let's kind of see some code. So we have our OSS Wumbo. Is that big enough for everybody? Cool. We have our OSS Wumbo repo, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna go to the settings, and I'm gonna navigate to the webhooks tab in the settings, and this is where you can add a webhook for any kind of post request that you want to listen for. So you can see we already have a couple. Ryan at HuBoard uses webhooks, which are really powerful. I think actually HuBoard is powered by webhooks, basically. All these events that happen. So you can pick all kinds of crazy things for this. So you can see we snapped up the OSS mailer Heroku name. So we want that payload to go to this endpoint. And you can include like a secret key if you want. And then by default, it kind of just sends you any event that happens on the repo. I wanted to get more granular with that because that can get extremely, it's already very noisy as it is. So I only listen for pull request events, but you can anytime somebody makes a commit comment, deletes, deploys, all kinds of stuff, issues, whatever you want, like somebody forks it. This all could be like leveraged to build like an analytics system or something that you would want to do, or whatever you want to do. And then you can select if it's active or not. And then below that, it shows you all of the events that have been fired off. And it says if they're good or if they're bad. So like this one was a 500, I think. And if I remember correctly, this is the one that was merged that didn't have any markdown body. So my Rails app had no clue what to do with the, have any markdown. It's like, oh, blow up. So, and then we can see like what a real one looks like. So this one is for a close event, and you get everything. So this is for pull request number 25. You can see the title here. So we kind of just like pick that off. You get all of the information about the user that merged it or did this action, I guess. You can get the body of what the pull request actually had. So like here you can see we have the checklist of who filled in their update and who didn't. And then, it just gives you everything about the pull request except, so you see how it has a milestone? I have not found where you can add or you can pick off a label without actually, so they give you all of these URLs to go do separate things. So for what I would want to do, I would have to find wherever the labels URL. I would have to hit this endpoint and then pull off all the labels and look for the proper label because it doesn't come through in this endpoint. But they do give you a whole lot of data to work with. All of this, if you want to sift through it, you can. But yeah, it gives you everything you can imagine about it. So that's kind of how you set up a webhook. It's per repo, and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. You can actually even change the content type, but JSON is the best. So then here's the mailer app that I built. And I just kind of wanted to show the controller because it's easy, and I can dive into a little bit of the actual mailer that sends it off to. So I have my repo controller. Again, like I'm not a Rails dev at all. I was just kind of like diving back in and like really liked messing with this stuff. So if anybody has good suggestions for like making this better, I'm all ears. But basically we hit this create action and then we do our filtering, like I said, and I get the markdown URL. I grab it, all of the body of that request. I set another variable for the sender and the date, and then I fire off this mailer and I just say .deliver, I want you to send this. So now it's the mailer's job to actually go and pull all of this together and send it off. So I'm gonna go into the mailer. This is the method that we called, OSS email. And you can see it has the same 3 arguments. And then right here is I immediately parse the markdown. I call my private method build title, which has bugs. I then render this markdown into the template of the email. And then I send it off. Yeah, it's kind of it, yeah.
Can you put any email in sender?
Yes.
Any email in the world?
Yep.
All right.
Yep. I think so. I'm pretty sure. Well, not specifically not for this app because it has to be a front side email that sends it to the front side project updates group, or else it'll just bounce because we don't.
Be authorized to
Yeah.
to the group.
Yep.
Okay.
So how are you planning to change the filtering so that you're not hard coding to check for that string for the title string?
So I can go back to the controller. Instead of doing this like params pull request title and then make sure it includes that, I would do a little bit of work above this to go out of this payload that we get, the params here. I would go get the labels URL, fetch that, and then make that API request and get the list of labels that are attached to this PR. And then I would look for the weekly email label. If that weekly email label doesn't exist, the email doesn't fire. But it was like 12:30 at night, and I was like, I really wanted to see this send an email.
Is that label in the JSON?
It is not.
Or where is that label?
So it would be, let's see, labels URL. So it would be here. So GitHub gives you like all of the data that they don't send along with it also. Like you can get who's forked it, who's a collaborator.
Right. I thought all of that was the JSON.
No, so these are just a URL for you. Like it points you to the right spot of where to look.
Oh.
But you have to, yeah, it doesn't provide you that information. You have to like, I want that information. Let me go get it, and then
you will look here and you can find what exactly you have to.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was kind of my journey in like, how can I make merging a PR actually shoot off an email? I guess the last part of the Yak Shave was trying to find a actual mailing system that would do this, and I ended up just using SendGrid. I tried really hard to use Gmail, but oddly enough, it didn't care. It didn't want it. It would not send to our group. Where does that live?
Like when you were trying to just connect to Google Mail and use our mail servers?
To Gmail, like, so that's what I use for my blog's contact form. Is I just use Gmail as STMP server to dyslexia. That thing to send off. But now, now I use SendGrid.
Is that free?
It is free for the first, like, I think you can send 10,000 emails a day for free. So I won't come close to that.
Yeah.
With SendGrid, I also get cool things. I think no one has ever clicked a link in our emails, and I can tell whenever somebody opens the email, because SendGrid sends along their little image pixel tracking thing.
So how do we? And this goes to project updates. So is the ultimate goal to like allow other people to subscribe to this group? Like let people outside the front side?
That would be neat. I would like that. Whoever would want to could. I kind of the real goal, like that was just the first step of this. What I want to do is there's no reason why we can't aggregate week to week like data and changes of all of our repos. And that's where this actually was born, was like, I want to style an email nicely, which I still haven't done yet. So all the work has gotten to me to the point where I can send the email, but now I want to include whatever the gem is to inline in HTML emails and stuff and make them look nice. But I want to style the email with our, like with our brand, and then also include like these things that happened on our OS repos, like how many issues were closed, how many were opened, how many were merged, blah, 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 like how many releases were cut, like kind of like what happened last week, not just in an update, but in like data.
Right.
And kind of like analytics on our open source.
Yeah, or like how Slack sends the emails of how many messages there were.
Kind of exactly like that. I still have the vision of like having a little thing at the bottom with all these like nicely styled stats. But the next thing is to get, like actually build a daily job that goes and hits the endpoints of all of the repos and gathers the stats and then stores them, so that I can do it over time.
Right.
And we've actually kind of talked about, like yesterday at lunch, building a front end for this and like making a dashboard so you can like change the date range and see like the health, and this could go very far. But yeah, that was kind of my journey of like learning how to webhook and handle that webhook and do stuff with that webhook.
Fantastic.
So now you know how it works. You can contribute now. Help! Alrighty. Bye, everyone watching, if you did.